So today we're going to look at something that's a little bit unusual, maybe depending on your point of view, a lot unusual. DC Comics' most famous character, their moneymaker for all intents and purposes, is Batman. And recently they advertised a hardcover edition of a Batman book from a collected work. But what most people don't realize is the hardcover collected edition for that book has been put on hold indefinitely. In fact, it's been put on hold until January of 2079. That's 50 years in the future. Is that a typo? No, it's not. But is it maybe speaking to a serious problem? Or is it just maybe just good business sense? Let's talk about it. And welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about the deluxe edition of the collected Batman Universe title and the very strange, very silly, almost bizarre delay of the book until January 2nd of 2079. If you look on the Amazon site, you can see it right there. I'll put a link down in the description below. Now, the reason this is unusual is because it says, basically, we have this collected work, a collected work that was, for all intents and purposes, relatively well received, both from the buying audience and from critical reception. If you go to the comic book roundup site, for example, for Batman Universe, largely you're in the 8.2 to 8.4 range. That's both for the user submitted reviews and from the established comic book review sites. Overall, that's not bad. It's not 9s, it's not 9.5s, but it's pretty darn good. And yet for some reason, DC has decided that they're going to put this book on the back burner. Now, are they doing it because it just makes good financial sense? I mean, times are tough, money is tight, people aren't so prone to buy everything off the shelves. That may be one side of it. But the other side of it is maybe it has something to do with one of the larger rumors that have popped up over in recent years about migrations of character creators from one publisher to the next. In this case, Brian Michael Bendis. The rumor going around is that Brian Michael Bendis has decided to get back into the Big Two ring, and instead of writing for DC, he's now writing for Marvel. Again, what he's writing for Marvel, when he's moving, and exactly how it's coming about, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But we're going to break down the context of who Brian Michael Bendis is, if you've never heard of him, why this hardcover edition of a story that he wrote is being delayed, and how this is maybe speaking to something that could be either good business sense, or maybe it's just a case of petty spite. So let's start with the basics. Let's begin with who Brian Michael Bendis is, if you're not aware. He is the architect of many of the modern Marvel constructs that we know today. He created the first version of Ultimate Spider-Man. He created Jessica Jones, or at least a modern incarnation of Jessica Jones as you know her. He created many of the larger, more popular, more successful characters and titles and storylines, primarily within Marvel in the early 2000s to 2000 teens, like 16, 17, and what have you. Now, towards the latter half of his tenure, primarily at Marvel, his reception was going downhill pretty fast. Civil War II was not received well. Some of the work he was doing was just sort of lackluster, and that's putting it generous. And to a certain degree, his work was kind of on the downside, indicating that maybe he was at the end of his creative rope at Marvel. DC then made a really big deal about Bendis coming over to them with an exclusivity deal. Right off the bat, DC made a big whoop about Bendis coming over and trying his hand at many of the larger DC characters. Many of the things that you associate with where DC is today, or at least during that time period, came from Brian Michael Bendis. Aging up John Kent, that was Brian Michael Bendis. Creating the character of Naomi, that was Brian Michael Bendis. Casting, reworking, race swapping, gender swapping, and all the things that you would associate with the now current version of the Legion of Superheroes, that was all Brian Michael Bendis. So when he came over from Marvel, and at the end of his tenure basically, because some of his works toward the end there were just poorly received, and he came over to DC, he wasted no time in trying to shake up the status quo coming up on in the sort of DC New 52 era of the publisher. By and large, most of his work did not land well. It did not go over well. Naomi was poorly received. The rework of the Legion was poorly received. Everything associated with John Kent being aged up and everything that happened after, very poorly received. So his arrival at DC may have been welcome in the very beginning, but it soured pretty fast. And as a result, after a few years, he basically left to go do his own thing, primarily doing some creator-owned work over at Dark Horse. But he's not exclusive. He hasn't been in the big two for a little while, so that seemed like, the end of his rope at the big two as a collection. But recently, thanks to a news report from Bleeding Cool, which we don't try to cite if we can help it, because Bleeding Cool is Bleeding Cool after all. There have been rumors swirling about that he is going to return to Marvel in some capacity. Is that actually going to happen? We're not exactly sure. What is he going to do when we get there? We're not exactly sure. The rumors seem to indicate that Brian Michael Bendis will be writing on the Avengers, possibly taking over for Jed MacKay. It wouldn't make sense because Jed MacKay is stretched pretty thin over at Marvel right now, because he's their most, maybe not their best writer, but it's certainly their most consistent and reliable writer. So we'll see what happens there. But what we do see is that since that rumor has come about, DC has now taken the hardcover of Batman Universe, which Brian Michael Bendis wrote for them in 2019, and put it on the back burner for a very long period of time. It was a relatively acclaimed run. It's only about 6 issues, so it's not very big. And the big antagonist in that series was Vandal Savage. So that's a pretty mainstay Batman type of character. It was a well-received run from a critically acclaimed writer, artwork by Nick Darrington, so that's plus is there as well. And these were originally released as Walmart exclusive series. So when we talk about getting distribution out beyond the local comic book shop, this was one of those runs where they put them in the plastic bags and put them in Walmart for people to pick up as part of their Walmart exclusive deal. It was very much a part of an experimental run in trying to update and expand DC's distribution with some limited success, although they don't do it anymore, so you could argue maybe it wasn't a big enough success. So where does that leave us now with the hardcover book? The book originally was supposed to come out this coming February 2026. The online listing for Amazon immediately shifted from 2026 in February to January of 2079. Now, that's not a cancellation per se, but it puts it far enough out that it really honestly doesn't matter. So the question is, why did they do it? It isn't about quality, because if you look at Comic Book Roundup, you can see you're getting about 8.4 to 8.2 on the critical assessment scale. So that's one thing. So it's not about quality, but is it about business? Why is DC scrubbing their Bendis era books? Now, if you look at that same article from Bleeding Cool, again, it's Bleeding Cool, so we try not to put too much faith in it, and also a follow-up from CBR as well, you'll notice that once the rumors popped up regarding Bendis returning to Marvel, Marvel started releasing hardcover editions of Bendis's former work, including the Ultimate line like Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate Fantastic Four. So that's usually an indication that the publisher is putting their support behind Bendis in anticipation of his return to Marvel. Likewise, you could make the same argument that DC is now scrubbing their association with Bendis because he is now deciding to go back to Marvel and stay away from DC. DC doesn't want to spend their money promoting a major collected edition for a writer whose next project is going to be with Marvel, their biggest competitor. So when you have Marvel propping up Bendis, even though no official announcement has been made, and DC pulling away their support from Bendis because it looks like he might not be coming back to DC, then you have this implication, this potential assessment. The major comic companies are, to be frank, petty. They're being shallow, they're being spiteful, if you want to look at it that way. They value the loyalty of their creators, and if the creator is not going to be loyal to them, they're going to pull back on sales because they don't want to make sure that he doesn't get any recognition and potentially doesn't get any royalty or bonus from those sales. And so the lesson here is the big two values loyalty over money. Now you could argue that's a dumb business decision, but that's just the way it is. And so if you're looking for a takeaway from this situation, Marvel is propping Bendis up. DC is pulling support from Bendis because all signs are pointing to Bendis going back to work for Marvel. What you're finding out is the quality of the book, the quality of the story, and the potential money that comes from that is secondary to the terms of the contract and the loyalty the publishers feel from the creators that may or may not work with them. Bendis' work, no matter how good it is now in the middle of this little pissing match between Marvel and DC. A deluxe edition, to be fair, is a sign of value. It's a sign that the company can make some money off of this. So if they're willing to give up their money, it's a very public statement by DC that says we no longer value the contribution of this creator. If you think from a business perspective, that doesn't make any sense. Money's money, and who cares if he's working for Marvel now versus DC? The winds of change blow in both directions, no matter which way you look on any given day. That's just the way they're handling it. So all signs point to a semi-official confirmation that Bendis is going back to Marvel, and in response, DC is pulling a petty move by taking the hardcover off the shelves. But seriously, if Bendis is going back to Marvel, which major DC character should they immediately cancel the collection for next? He didn't just write Batman, he wrote a bunch of stuff. So if they're going to keep canceling stuff because they're losing Bendis' support or loyalty, if you want to talk about it, which of the books do you think they're going to pull after Batman Universe? Leave a comment down below, and I want to hear what you got to say about it. And so when a publisher gives a book release date of 2079, the opinion is pretty clear on that front. It's just the best way they can say that you're fired. There's just no way around it. Hopefully you found this little video informational and helpful. And if you want more deep dives into what's going on with the business drama, and not just the pretty pictures, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. Leave a like. Let me know what you think of the video. Now, go read comics, but read wisely. I'll see you next time for more comical opinions.